Hello, and welcome back. This video is the first in a series that will take you through the carbon footprinting process step by step, giving you practical guidance on how you can build an industry best practice carbon footprint. This week, we're going to take a look at one of the most important and sometimes overlooked elements of carbon footprinting, and that's setting your reporting boundary. When you're thinking about your carbon footprint, sometimes it can be very tempting to jump straight in, start getting overexcited about heat pumps, Excel spreadsheets, and fancy carbon reporting platforms. But doing so can cause you some serious problems later down the line. The first thing you need to consider is, how will I go about setting my reporting boundary? How will I know in a very complex carbon-orientated society which emissions I am responsible for? Often company structures are complex, including joint ventures, subsidiaries, franchisees, and investments, as key elements to consider when considering the volume and types of carbon emissions your company could be responsible for. To help manage this process, I'd first consider your own organizational hierarchy. Write these out in a typical company hierarchy diagram so that you can walk through your thinking and have a record of how you formulated your GHG reporting boundary. Then, using this diagram as your guide, consider which boundary type you're going to apply to your beautifully created organizational hierarchy. The WRI GHG Protocol's corporate standard sets out 3 clear definitions on how a GHG boundary may be set. And these are described as the equity share, financial control, or operational control approaches. The operational control approach is by far the most common way of assessing which carbon emissions your company is responsible for. And in this case, you account for the emissions for which your company has operational control. In this case, it's assumed that a company will account for all emissions, where it is able to introduce policies and procedures that could reasonably be expected to affect a company's carbon footprint. So, if your company is responsible for the operation of 2 subsidiaries, named Bapple and Grovis, under the control approach, you would account for all emissions associated with these subsidiaries. However, often a control approach may not be a true reflection of who is ultimately responsible for an operation's emissions. And in this case, a company may choose the financial control or equity share approach. For example, if our imaginary company will ultimately benefit from the financial success or ruin of Bapple, but it has no such connection with Grovis, then under a financial control approach, you'd only account for the carbon emissions associated with Bapple and none from Grovis. Under the final approach method, equity share, this is typically used where a company part owns a subsidiary, and it's recognized that their financing of the company makes them responsible for its emissions. So in this case, if our imaginary company owns 42% of Bapple, then it would only account for 42% of those emissions. This is a particularly useful method for those companies in the financial sector or with a complex organizational structure. So before deciding on your boundary approach, consider which organizational boundary best represents the emissions your company is ultimately responsible for. Think about who could be ultimately liable. How would it align with the financial reporting? Does it represent a complete picture of your business? Once you've made your decision, clearly note down which approach you're using to set your organizational boundary, specifying which company structures fall within your carbon reporting scope. You can do this alongside your company hierarchy structure, making it crystal clear which parts of your organization fall in or out of your reporting scope. And that's it for now. To find out how you can use this structure to begin building out your own carbon footprint in more detail, like and subscribe and stay tuned for the next video. If you've got any questions, suggestions, or feedback, please feel free to leave them in the comments section below.